In 2014, Rush Limbaugh announced on air that he was leaving New York because of high taxes. Made a big show of it, moved to Florida, complained about liberal policies destroying the city. 1 year later, he quietly moved back to Manhattan. When reporters asked why, he said he missed the restaurants. That's how serious these threats are. Late last year, the same headlines we've seen for 40 years started appearing again. 800,000 New Yorkers preparing to flee. 16,500 ultra-wealthy individuals relocating internationally. The UK losing almost 10,000 millionaires in a single year. Politicians lined up to warn us. If we raise taxes on the wealthy, they'll take their money, their jobs, and their businesses somewhere else. And ironically, we'll end up with less tax revenue than we started with. Here's the thing. We now have 40 years of data showing what actually happens when rich people make these threats. So let's see if they ever follow through. And more importantly, whether we should even care if they do. The argument comes with a fancy economic theory called the Laffer curve, named after Arthur Laffer, who became famous during the Reagan administration. The idea is simple. If tax rates are very low, government revenue will be low. As you raise rates, revenue increases. But eventually, if you push too high, you'll collect less because people either work less or move away. Plot this on a graph and you get a curve with a sweet spot in the middle. Politicians who want to cut taxes love pointing at this curve and claiming we're on the wrong side of it. Lower the rates, they say, and you'll stimulate so much economic activity that total revenue actually goes up. It's a neat theory. It was also literally invented on a napkin to justify tax cuts for Reagan's rich donors. Arthur Laffer himself admitted in later interviews that he had no data to back it up when he drew it. It was marketing, not economics. But forget the theory, let's look at what actually happens in the real world. In 1981, they said Reagan's tax cuts would unleash unprecedented prosperity. In 1993, Fox News warned that Clinton's tax increases would cause an exodus of wealth from America. In 2003, they warned that state tax hikes would empty California. In 2013, they said Obama's policies would drive millionaires offshore. In 2023, they're still making the exact same warnings. You know what actually happened? The number of millionaires in America quadrupled. A 2017 study looked at 27 developed countries and found that almost all of them were on the left side of that curve, meaning they could raise taxes on top earners and collect more revenue, not less. The three countries with the biggest gap between their actual tax rates and the revenue maximizing rates were Mexico, Slovakia, and the United States. We're not overtaxed. We're leaving money on the table because we keep pretending to believe people who've been wrong for 4 decades. People have been predicting the death of New York since the 1970s. Every single time the city or state talks about raising taxes, the same parade of warnings floods the news. The millionaires are leaving. The tax base is collapsing. The city's running out of money. There's one small problem. New York's millionaire population has nearly doubled since 2010. Even after adjusting for inflation, there are more wealthy people living in New York City today than at any point in history. Over 34,000 New Yorkers now make at least $1 million a year. Turns out, threatening to leave is a lot easier than actually giving up your social network, your business connections, and your courtside Knicks seats. And it's not even hard to dodge New York taxes if you really wanted to. Live in New Jersey, commute in every day. Or do what hedge fund managers do. Live in Miami and make sure you spend fewer than 182 days a year in your New York apartment. Some people do exactly this, and they get enormous media attention precisely because they're so rare. For everyone else, the business opportunities available in New York, against the hassle of gaming residency rules, make it worth just paying the taxes. You don't build a career in finance, law, media, or tech by living somewhere else and hoping it works out remotely. Here's something that'll blow your mind. European countries with higher tax rates have generally seen higher rates of wealth growth over the last 15 years. The countries with the highest wealth per capita all have very high and progressive taxation. Good schools, functioning infrastructure, and healthcare you don't have to crowdfund on GoFundMe turn out to be worth paying for, even to rich people. Wild, right? There is one place where wealthy people actually did leave in significant numbers, the United Kingdom. And what happened there proves the exact opposite of what you'd think. For years, London marketed itself as a financial center for global wealth, with minimal questions asked. They created special tax arrangements for foreign residents. They made it easy to park money in British real estate with almost no scrutiny. And it worked. Wealthy people from Russia, the Middle East, and elsewhere flooded into London. But here's what they actually brought. They drove home prices to absurd levels, turned the financial system into what can only be described as a laundromat with a Burberry storefront, and contributed almost nothing to the actual economy. Sure, some billionaires hired maids and drivers, but the average Brit probably didn't consider becoming a butler to Boris Warkremesky an ideal economic outcome. A 2022 study found that most of the high-skilled financial work these people supposedly brought was being done offshore anyway. When Britain finally decided to stop letting oligarchs use London as the Cayman Islands with better restaurants, these people did start leaving, primarily to Dubai, which has essentially become what London was a decade ago, a tax haven with luxury shopping stapled on, and a generous helping of modern slavery. So yes, wealthy people can leave, but London is the exception that proves the rule. When you fill a city with people who were only there for the tax deal to begin with, those are exactly the people who'll leave when a better deal shows up. They have no connection to the place, no ties to the community, and by definition, they don't want to contribute. Competing in a race to the bottom for a few thousand wealthy individuals looking to pay back as little as possible is a losing proposition. Even if you win, your prize is a collection of people with no local attachment, who by definition don't want to contribute. And here's the kicker. Even while this was happening, the total number of millionaires in the UK actually increased. Homegrown wealth kept growing. And that wealth is much less likely to leave because it's where these people actually live, where their families are, where their businesses operate. Let's talk about how significant this supposed exodus really is. There's a chart from the most recent global migration report that shows the total migration rate of millionaires across all countries, with the biggest outflows. The chart is essentially blank, not because I screwed up the graph again, but because the numbers are that small. The report said that millionaires migrating in the 2024 represented approximately 0% of millionaires at global and national levels. There are about 60 million millionaires in the world today. A few thousand finding a new home isn't even a rounding error. And this includes wealthy people moving for reasons that have nothing to do with taxes, fleeing war zones, political instability, or just retiring somewhere warm. The actual number leaving specifically because of tax policy is even smaller. We're talking about a problem that doesn't exist being used to justify policy that benefits the people making the threats. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that rich people did start leaving in large numbers. Would that actually be a disaster? If you look at countries that experienced real capital flight like Venezuela, Lebanon, South Africa, and Russia, there's definitely a pattern. But here's what the data shows. It wasn't wealthy people leaving that destabilized those countries. It was the instability that caused wealthy people to leave. Correlation, causation, all that good stuff. Several studies, including research by Nobel Prize winners, looked at what countries actually lose when high net worth individuals emigrate. The overwhelming finding is that the biggest loss is skilled workers, not wealthy investors. Losing doctors, engineers, lawyers, and institutional managers hurts. Money can be printed. Infrastructure can't be packed in a suitcase. Human capital is mobile and hard to replace. Here's the thing though. Those skilled professionals, they're way less likely to leave than some billionaire investor because their qualifications often don't transfer between countries. A medical degree from one place doesn't automatically let you practice somewhere else. The best way to keep these people around is simple. Make sure institutions work and people can afford to live near their jobs. You know who's actually leaving expensive cities right now? Teachers who can't afford rent, nurses priced out by luxury condo conversions, the electrician who has to commute 2 hours because his neighborhood got gentrified into an Airbnb farm, a billionaire leaving frees up a penthouse, a teacher leaving closes a classroom. Guess which one politicians spend more time worrying about? Here's something else the threat completely ignores. Most of the wealth these supposedly mobile billionaires control isn't actually mobile. If you're a billionaire, huge portions of your wealth are tied up in investments that physically cannot move. Real estate obviously stays put, but even investments in tech companies or financial firms are rooted in place. The expertise that makes those companies valuable, the skilled employees, the infrastructure, the business relationships, none of that easily relocates to another country. Wealthy Americans could theoretically renounce their citizenship and move overseas for lower taxes. But almost nobody does it because having access to Silicon Valley, Wall Street, American real estate markets, And the US financial system is worth more than the tax savings. That same 2017 study found the US could set top marginal rates as high as 76%, and most people would still pay it because leaving would cost them more in lost opportunities than they'd save on taxes. The study wasn't recommending that policy, just pointing out that the threat is hollow. These people need New York, San Francisco, and Seattle more than those cities need them. They're just too proud to admit it. And honestly, the few who do leave, good. Let them go. Take your empty threats, your tax lawyers, and your barely used vacation homes to Dubai. We'll take our chances with the teachers, nurses, and engineers you priced out of the city trying to build your third guest house. Every penthouse that opens up is housing for someone who actually contributes to the community. Every luxury condo that doesn't get built is space for something useful. Every billionaire who leaves is one less person lobbying to gut the public services that made the city work in the first place. If low taxes were all it took to build a thriving first world economy, the Burj Khalifa would have been built in Ireland. Turns out you actually need things like educated workers, functioning infrastructure, and a legal system that isn't just whoever has the most money wins. So here's what we know after 40 years of threats. Rich people don't leave when you raise their taxes. In the rare cases they do, it's usually because they had no real attachment to begin with. And when stable, developed countries raise taxes on the wealthy, they collect more revenue, not less. The next time some billionaire threatens to leave if taxes go up, maybe we should just call their bluff. Say, okay, leave, pack up, we'll send you a postcard. Something tells me most of them will suddenly remember why they live where they live in the first place. And the few who actually go will be just fine without them. Probably better, actually. Before you go, drop a comment with the name of one billionaire who actually followed through on their threat to leave. I'll wait. You're probably going to have to be waiting a while too. And if you want to see more of the economy's greatest hits of bullshit, go watch my video on why housing affordability is about to get much worse. Or the one explaining why most people don't matter to the economy anymore. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep learning how money works.